Welcome to the Agilists Aspire and Achieve in Your Agile Career video podcast series. This series is all about helping you grow, thrive, and make an impact in your career and the community with an Agile mindset. Whether you're just starting out or you're an experienced practitioner, we're here to bring you inspiring stories, actionable advice, and meaningful conversations that will help you navigate and excel in your Agile career, meeting some amazing mentors along the way. Get ready to aspire, achieve, and thrive in the next step in your journey.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, of course. My name is Sibila. I have been an Agilist for about 10 years. I started in the traditional project management space, and then going through my first transformation, someone thought of putting me into a Scrum Master seat, and I've truly embraced it. I really started to love working with people and figured out how actually people come first, and then processes, tools, and everything comes second to enable that. So I started 10 years ago. I haven't really looked back, and within my career I've worked in different industries: software engineering, marketing, DevOps, SRE right now. Prior to that, even touching on HR and stuff like that. So I've just been overall trying to employ all these agile practices to different industries.
Beautiful. Well, I'm looking forward to digging into all of that a little bit more, because our topic today is how do I apply Agile in other tech or business roles? It sounds like you've got lots to talk about there. First of all, though, and you mentioned it a little bit in your intro, but can you share with us how you started, how you found yourself in an Agile career?
Yes, definitely. So first, I started sort of volunteering with a group who was employing Scrum to do software development, and that was my first sort of introduction in Agile and Agile practices. And then when I started my first real job in finance, we merged with IT, with business systems, and the CTO at that time really was interested in us going through a transformation, because it was sort of on the cusp of that big boom in Agile practices and Agile methodologies and frameworks during that time, that we thought that with the growth that we were experiencing and the merging of the two departments, this was going to work really well for us. So I found myself going from that traditional project management seat into the Scrum Master seat, because I had a people approach already, and then they just wanted me to sort of like build on that and become even more people driven with that. So with that agile mindset and everything leading, like we're propagating that. So that was my first sort of introduction into, here I am, a Scrum Master, trying to learn the things, and already in the seat trying to also teach and train others on something that I didn't know that much about, but was really excited to learn more about. And from then on, I just thought Scrum Mastery was really it for me. I embraced it totally. I really loved it. And ever since then, I worked with like Scrum, Kanban, and other Agile practices and frameworks in my career. So about 10 years ago, I started, and I really didn't look back since then.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you what you've observed about the role of career development in Agile career development over the years.
It's a bit of a loaded question. It's been very rewarding, but kind of like a very even difficult journey for myself, at least. Starting somewhere, say 10 years ago, we didn't have as many resources as we've got today. Yes, there were accrediting bodies, but you really didn't know whom to go to and how to go to that. And it was not that easy to convince employers to invest the time and the budget to do that for you. So there was really researching on your own and figuring out like how to take it to the next level and what that would actually look like. We did not have the many organizations that we've got today to support us through the journeys. There weren't as many volunteering opportunities, which we have today. And we didn't have as many kind of like global opportunities as well as we do today. So it's been kind of a peculiar and difficult journey. And the first 5 to 6 years and the last 3 or 4 years of my career have just been like that big boom of things that I've gone through. And since I've worked as a Scrum Master and then transitioned off into more of the coaching roles, it's become sort of second nature to me and a lot easier as I've progressed and as I've learned and as I've improved myself. So in the beginning, it was kind of harder and more difficult, but now with all the resources and learning opportunities, it's become a little bit easier.
Yeah. You mentioned that you progressed from a project management background to find yourself in Scrum Mastering. What were some of the things you had to unlearn to be a Scrum Master?
My favorite one was working with project sponsors, and there would basically always be like, I need this report Friday afternoon at this time about where the tasks are and how much of a percentage have we moved in the past week or so. In Agile and as a Scrum Master, I've taken a complete 180 of actually talking to the teams to understand what's in their way and why aren't they maybe progressing as much. And it wouldn't be a Friday afternoon, it would be somewhere like on a daily stand-up or so, and I would have the information much sooner than say that weekly report. So I thought that was just an excellent way of getting people to believe in the same type of goal, and the reporting actually came secondary to that, and it didn't have to be the way it was in the traditional role where it would just be a weekly thing, but it would be totally like disconnected from what people were doing and what they were struggling with.
Yeah,
So
it's
that one's my favorite. I always tell that story about the weekly project reports at 4 p.m. on a Friday that nobody's going to read
Yes,
until Monday,
exactly.
but they have to be turned in for whatever reason.
I remember I once I was in an organization and I had to produce as a Scrum Master, and I had to produce the same thing, right? But it was more of a sprint report, but it had to be by a certain time on a certain day, and I asked who read them, and they went, "No, it's just got to go to all of the leadership team." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And I thought, I'm just going to test this out because I'm spending time creating this report, and is it actually being read? Because I've not ever, no questions have been asked, so I just stopped sending them one week, one sprint. No one ever noticed.
Yep.
No one came up to me and went, "Where's that sprint report, Renae? I want to see how this team's going." Or I'm like, no one ever asked, and so I never had to do a sprint report ever again.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Funny.
And I've had a similar thing with hey, I would ask like, well, why do you need these reports? And I was like, well, we'll always receive them, but have they ever held any value to you? And they couldn't qualify and quantify that value. And then I would be like, well, that sounds like it's a waste then why would we even have them? Like somebody would be stressing out to submit them and they wouldn't even be read, and the person who might be actually requesting them doesn't really find value in them, but it's a habit or something that they've always done this way, and they just maybe do not realize that there's a better way.
Yeah. You mentioned that you love the people side of Scrum Mastering. Well, that was one of the things that surprised you, I guess, coming from a project management background. So
Yep.
what were the other things that you fell in love with Scrum Mastering and made you, want to stick with it for so long?
It was even early on, it was the sense of community, and I embraced the beginnings of it and would read and talk to people who were there in the beginning and what they struggled with. And what stuck with me was they weren't really delivering that value. They would be talking about it for years and years, and they would just be like begging to release something to the end customer that would hold value to them. And I was putting myself into the shoes of that customer and that user. And I was like, I want the cool new thing. And I know that Agile teams really want to do the right thing and build the cool new thing for these folks. but they might not get the chance because of a lot of layers in between. So I go back to the beginnings, when the whole thing sort of got started and those 17 people got into a room and were struggling to make the lives of us better today. And I know we've grown since then, but it's like think about like how harder it was even for them to get across all those layers, especially in management, in leadership, and like the hierarchy. So with Agile and how I embraced that in my role, I found that those lines, hierarchy lines, were just getting blurrier and they were almost disappearing for me. So all of a sudden, I found myself being able to talk to the CTO and CEO and really talk about the vision and the mission and talk about what's really going on the teams. And I could understand and see that they were actually listening. So in the older ways, it probably would not have been possible, but with the way I was working and how I was working and what sort of opportunities I've had, those lines for me just became very flat. And I thought that was great because I could work across the organization completely without ever worrying about like what department somebody is in, what they're doing, but just basically like, here's what they're doing and here's how we want to make things better and can you help us out? And that was
Yeah.
very rewarding to me.
Yeah. Beautiful. So let's explore some of those non-tech areas that you've worked in. So marketing, you mentioned marketing. Can you tell us a story about your time in marketing and how you helped apply Agile in
Yes,
there?
it was interesting because it's one of the most hectic industries, I believe. Uh, they just have so much on their plates on a daily basis. They're talking to customers, they're figuring out designs, they're talking to customer support folks, UX folks, even engineers, and there's just so many pieces that are moving all the time, and it's just so hard to keep apprised of everything. And then because of that, what I found was that they would use different tools, but they weren't being set up for them as well as they could be. And a lot of overhead with the processes. A lot of things could actually be automated for them. And I was like, well, you are just, killing yourselves working so many hours where you really don't have to. So let's explore some ways to make this better for you, make this look better for you. And like, let's not worry about the reporting where you don't need to. We can basically automate that. We can figure things out for you. So marketing's been definitely one of the most hectic industries that I've ever been in. We've had a lot of fun, but the hours would be long and it would be very easy to blur agile with the chaos. And we were always looking for better ways of working, but sometimes we would get impatient and abandoned before they could actually be proven and the evidence would be there that this is actually working for us. So when I talk a little bit about sustainable pace, this is the group that I really trained a lot with to help them understand what that means, how working on sustainability is actually burning them out, and that they could be much, much more sustainable if they just automated and basically did things a little more seamlessly.
I remember years ago I worked with a marketing department, and it was a huge team, and I agree it was very, very busy. And some of the things I did, a couple of the first things I did was visualized all of the stuff that was going on. And I introduced the daily stand up as well, so they could talk to each other and help each other out. If there's someone doing something similar, well, can you just do that one while you're in there? Instead of, just finding small bits of time that we could take from their day so that they could either spend it on other things or, yes, find that balance where they had a life still, not just constantly working.
Yeah, what helped my group in particular with being customer facing, because they weren't as much with the nature of their work, and they would go further and further onto a concept before actually putting something in front of a customer and a client. We would introduce those demos to clients so they would see like how far along the team is going with the concept and get that early feedback
Yeah.
loop. So that helped them immensely to
Yeah.
cut down on that overhead and just like not go in the direction if they didn't need to, or if that's not what the client envisioned. So demos really helped this group out, and they embraced it. After a while, it was a little bit uncomfortable because, again, they didn't have this much interaction on certain teams. It would go through however many levels before it goes before a client. But this way, somebody who was on a team, like a team member, would actually present to a client. So we would have to coach them up in public speaking
Yeah.
and skills like that. But
Yeah.
in the end, it was very rewarding, and they basically got a lot out of it. And it really cut down on a lot of overhead with the hours and the hectic nature of work. They could basically figure out the ways early on and see if they're going in the right direction or not, and pivot.
Yeah, it's breaking that perfection. It's got to be perfect before we can show a client. Yeah, interesting. Any other non-tech areas you've worked in?
Marketing, definitely one. I've crossed over with people ops a lot, like HR folks. Even in my current role, I've worked with that group on certain aspects of like road mapping. And again, a lot of overhead and how they were meeting up to figure out like what's on the docket for their roadmap and how they want to basically roll out certain things. So with the ways of my coaching, I kind of like steer them along with the outcome based stuff instead of just deadline driven. And as a result of that, they were able to have meetings about that sooner than later and just basically have consensus and decision making happen sooner than later because they were focusing on the outcomes rather than making something by a certain deadline. So they weren't as task driven. They were more like, here's the goal and here's the outcome of that goal we're seeking. And maybe we're going to put it against a quarter or two, but at least we'll know what the progress is sooner than later. So it was very rewarding for them to come back and say, as a result of this and you coaching us up on these concepts, we've actually cut down on like weeks and weeks of work that we would otherwise spend on being task driven and deadline driven. Now we're just basically talking about goals, and we are moving that much faster and quicker and with more clearer vision and mission in mind.
Yeah. Nice. And you said you're in ops now?
I'm in DevOps now. I'm actually in site reliability engineering. Again, it sort of spurred from DevOps movement. Site reliability engineering is something that Google introduced, I would say, at least a decade ago. So it's like a split of software engineering and operational work and trying to tie out and marry the two. And sometimes it's very hectic because folks end up being on call. Should something have an incident or something happens, production goes down, or we have a bug and we have to roll back and stuff like that. So these are the folks that keep the things running behind the lines.
Yes, I can imagine that would be quite chaotic and again hard for them to find their sustainable pace with things like that happening.
Definitely, definitely. I think what they're also struggling with a lot of the time is the predictability. They would love to be more predictable, but with the nature of the work, sometimes the patterning and anti-patterning of certain things happening actually disrupt the sprint goals and project work that much that the sprints might actually make a lot of sense after a week or so because we do bi-weekly. And then because of some certain things not going our way, we basically have to pivot so many more times. And as a result of that, we don't really become as predictable as we might need to be. And that's sort of the discussion points we usually have with the rest of the org. Like, this is what's happening, and this is the nature of the work. And we have to build roadmaps based off of that. Like, is this worth automating? Does this happen often enough so that it's a real
Yep.
problem? Or is this like a one off in a quarter? And then is it really one person's capacity that gets eaten up on this? Or is this like an entire team thing? So we have to balance those sort of interrupts and escalations with our project work and seeing what makes sense. Because again, a lot of what we do is with reliability, security, compliance, and standardization, and just making automation happen on a lot of things. But some things may not be worth automating, so we have to explore those too.
Yeah. So capturing lots of data to inform those decisions.
We are very data driven, yes.
That's good. That's good.
Yes. And
Did you? Sorry, you go.
yeah, we have to be very diligent and careful of our metrics and understanding what it is that we measure, and like, are those things actually important? And again, like, how does that affect the end user, our customer? Because customer is ultimately the person that we care about, that our systems are running, and are they reliable, and are they, up to par with what they're expecting. So that's all on us. So we have to be very careful about the metrics, and we really need to be diligent about them, and we need to look into like which ones are worth automating versus not, and then looking into what is actually toil, what type of toil work we've got, and is toil worth getting rid of and automating, or is it not?
Yeah. So what do you, apart from working in all these different areas, what do you do for your own professional development?
I mentioned this in the beginning. It's the community is just much larger now, and especially in the last few years, with COVID, a lot of Agile folks have actually taken advantage of that, and virtually we've been able to do a bunch of conferencing summits and all the other stuff. So I volunteer a lot for those. Recently I volunteered for the online summit. I'm a part of the Women in Agile group mentorship program for like a second cohort now. Also pursuing like elevated competency based certifications, but outside of that also additional training. So try to keep as active as I can in the community and figure out like what's going on so that I can bring that back to my teams and we can figure out our footing. So on a daily basis, I'm following what's going on in the Agile world and just keeping on my toes and understanding like where we are currently and what my teams could actually benefit from. So I do a lot of coaching and I do a lot of mentorship inside my own organization right now. I might not be just a scrum master for a team or two, which is always what I am at heart, because that's where kind of I started. I'm more of a coach now to organization and to people inside that organization. So I leverage those skills, and whoever needs it, I'm available to them.
Beautiful. I think you and I are the same. I found myself anyway as a Scrum Master, and I still, and that was 14, 15 years ago, and I still think of myself as a Scrum Master today, even though I coach organizations and teams and whatever. I still think of myself at the end of the day, I still feel like I'm a Scrum Master. It's weird.
Yeah. And it's something that I've truly embraced, and that's who I am at heart. So if a team, say, has a really a need for someone to come in as a scrum master, and I have the bandwidth, I will volunteer for that, and I'll be like, okay, I'll come by and be that scrum master for you, because that's who I am at heart.
Yeah.
And I can always put on my coach hat or my mentor hat whenever I need to, because I think a scrum master needs to be that as well if they are to grow, and they need to know when to switch between those hats and what the team or the individual at that moment truly needs.
Yeah. It's a good way to volunteering or, stepping up to be a Scrum Master to fill in for a team, it's a good way to keep your kind of skills or keep that experience up to date, because you're right, we are coaching other Scrum Masters and teams, and if you were a Scrum Master 10 years ago and you haven't done it since, then, and you're coaching Scrum Masters, then you really have to feel the pain and try out the different, and I find with my own professional growth, there's lots of mindset-y stuff that you learn, or that I learn, and then I'm like, I wonder how I can bake that into a retro. So I get to practice. Sorry, teams.
Yes. And what I also find rewarding is when I'm cycling through teams like that and rotating through teams as a Scrum Master, and if there are more Scrum Masters, which there are usually inside an org, and sometimes we'll rotate from a team and go back to the initial team. It's always good to see what the person has done with the team after that, after I've sort of rolled off and then came back on, or if they've been on their own for a while after I've rolled off, and see like what they've actually kind of embraced and what they found was overhead, and we would have those conversations as well. What's the most rewarding about that is when you come back, and then for people that were kind of harder to reach, all of a sudden you're hearing that they have embraced the trainings and teachings that you were always kind of trying to instill in them, and now they're speaking that language. And I was like, oh wow, what happened to you? Because it was so hard for me 2 years ago to have this conversation with you, but now it's kind of like looking in the mirror and you're saying these things that I was saying. And I was like, when did this happen? And they were like, when you rolled off, I thought about this and I reflected, and it started to make sense when your absence was noticed, when you were teaching us these things and going through these things with us. Now that you are now, I kind of had to take on that role, and I was going through what you were going through, and now I understand it. So it's like, that's actually how I wanted you to embrace this. And that's the kind of like the best way to see for yourself, and not just believe in something because your Scrum Master is saying like, this is how it's always done. That's never a good technique.
Yeah. That's why we do what we do, when you see those people. Yeah. Any final words of wisdom you have for our audience?
I would just say keep an open mind. I think what I've sort of gone through in my career, I was able to truly embrace this by just not fearing the change and having an open mind about it, and just understanding that chips will fall into place if I work at it. So if there's a challenge, if there's a struggle, explore the ways to address it, but don't ever look in within yourself like it's you failing at something. You just have to go through that journey, and if a certain technique or a certain thought doesn't pan out, there's always something else. But giving up is the worst. So just kind of keeping an open mind and figuring out that things will fall into place and things will happen as they need to, because they truly will. And you will find a footing. It's just being able to be open to that and not just like giving up, because I think giving up will basically be all doors closed because of that.
Beautiful. Sibila, it was beautiful speaking to you today. Thank you very much for joining us. It was great getting to know about your journey.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Agilists, Aspire and Achieve in Your Career. We hope you found inspiration and practical tips to elevate your Agile journey. Remember, growth doesn't happen alone, so consider exploring the Women in Agile Mentorship Program and/or follow the Agile Careers MPO on LinkedIn to see more content geared towards advancing your careers. A huge thank you to our amazing sponsors, Scrum.org, for their continued support in empowering Agile professionals and creating opportunities for career advancement. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what topics you'd love to see next. Keep aspiring, keep achieving, and continue thriving in your career.